Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today I have a special guest coming onto the podcast, the executive director of the Maryland Film Festival at the SNF Parkway Theater. Please welcome Sandra L. Gibson. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Rob, for having me on. Absolutely.
And I'm glad we were able to chat a little bit more. Like it's just teeth on this side of the visual. So that's what's happening. But yeah, thank you. And really dig what your work is. I've been kind of reading on the background, but I want to start off by having the folks kind of get dipped, the listeners get dipped. So could you give us those vital stats and describe your background and the mission of the Maryland Film Festival? Give us all of that right there.
Yeah. So my background is pretty varied. I've been at this for a very long time, a couple of decades in Southern California and a couple of decades here in Maryland. I'm a musician by training. I'm a pianist, clarinetist. I play a bunch of non-Western instruments. I'm also an ethnomusicologist, but I began working in film very early on in my career. UCLA, then American Film Institute. I actually ran the 7-acre campus and the West Coast operation in the early 80s after they moved from Washington, D.C. there. So I've been around a long time in the field in a variety of guises, running big industry associations to smaller organizations like this. And my favorite, I think, is the on-the-ground local organizations. I've run arts councils. I've done a lot of things in my time. And so coming here was sort of a return to film. Returned to Baltimore. I did a little stint at the Reginald F. Lewis when Skip Sanders was there and they brought in the Kinsey collection. I come to Baltimore for jazz because it's one of the few places where you can still see jazz in a warehouse or in a supper club. And Baltimore is just live and energized all the time. And so Maryland Film Festival, I actually came, they had this new building, the beautiful Parkway Theater, which is 106 years old. It opened as the Parkway in October 1915 with a film called Zaza. It was designed after the West End theaters in London and theaters in New York. It's like a vaudeville house. Yeah. And when we got it in 2014, it was in really a state of disrepair. So we did an $18.2 million renovation. I wasn't here for that. I'm benefiting from all of that largesse. And beautifully restored, and then added 2 brand new stories, second and third floor, and small screening rooms that double as classrooms during the day for students at Maryland Institute College of Art and Johns Hopkins Film and Media. And we really mix it up here. We got just under 600 seats. We have a full bar and a lounge, and it's intended to really be a film center. And we're taking it a little further. We really want to explore the expanse of cinematic form, the expanse of moving image art. Because filmmakers today, particularly filmmakers of color, are not just making single channel work. They're making multi-channel work. They're exploring virtual reality, AI, augmented reality. They're exploring hybridity, multimedia in new and different ways. And we think our audiences and Baltimoreans should really experience that. We think they should be able to engage with that. We think students should be able to engage with it. So what we're doing right now, we still have our theaters open. We still show the Batmans and the nowhere inns, the small indie all the way to the big blockbuster. But we're activating every space in this building. So we've put up screens on the North Charles walls, and we're going to be with projectors running multimedia works that you can see from outside and inside. That'll start this summer. That's amazing. We're going to be doing exhibitions. We just took out an exhibition as part of the Asian North Festival by Janjin Kaisen, a very well-known South Korean artist. And she had 2-dimensional work, a multimedia installation. We actually built a wall in one of our lounges. And then we rotated her single-channel films in 2 of our screening rooms. So we're trying to mix it up and find ways for this place to become more porous and more permeable and more inviting, and to create a kind of sense of belonging here. I mean, the mission is broad. It's bring filmmakers, films, and audiences together in a unique way, an inclusive way that reflects the uniqueness of Baltimore. And we contributed to the dialogue about film and filmmaking globally, but that's a pretty broad mission, and I want to get it on the ground. How do we create a sense of belonging? As Rada Blank came in here and did a program with DeWanda Wise, who was the lead actress in Spike Lee's recreation of She's Gotta Have It as a TV series. And we did a little premiere with Nawanda. She's from here. She grew up and went to a local high school. And I'll never forget it. Radha got on the stage and she said, "The Parkway is my birthright." If you don't feel that, if you don't feel comfortable coming here, you got to make it your own. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget it because that's the kind of spirit we want to engender, community ownership, some sense of belonging. We've got to redouble our efforts. I think we have a responsibility to this community for the Parkway to be your house.
Yeah.
And so how do we, and that's a lot of shifting and changing. That's not what Western European art houses do. You know, we curate the program, we put it up, you buy your tickets, we bring a filmmaker in, you have a discussion. So we're really trying to infuse this and turn curating on its head and really reach into the community more, certainly pay more attention. We've spent the last 2 years really thinking about how do we lift up filmmakers and their work today in the pandemic, not just globally, but here in Baltimore. Yeah. What's the set of needs and services? So we're doing town halls. We're going to launch a series called Open Works, where you can have an audience you can showcase your film. Works in progress. Many filmmakers don't have a place to just sit around the table, screen their film, get some feedback.
Yeah.
Just really trying to break down the hierarchy and barriers, and so that there's a different kind of openness here. And that's the same with the festival, because you can take down this mission a lot of different ways. My way of thinking about it is this permeability, this accessibility, and also being out in the community. So this summer, we're going to be Parkway Outdoors. We are going on the road and taking films into the community, into neighborhoods where there are movie theaters, and we'll be at a park site. Outdoors, in the open. We got a couple of grants actually, to put together an inflatable screen, a mobile DCP. So, and I think being in the community, everybody won't come here, and we only got 600 seats. And then we do concerts. So we were part of the Tupac Shakur citywide celebration in September. We had Boom Bap Society. So we really try to do what we can for indie music, poetry, whether it's sometimes we have a speaker series. We did a great maker series with Made in Baltimore, and it was actually their network of makers came and did a talk, and then we did a pop-up in the lounge. So we're really trying to look at the way that we use this space to benefit the community in new and different ways. And I think the uniqueness and diversity and intersectionality of Baltimore has to be on display here. Yeah. Whether it's Baltimore artists or it's artists coming in from outside. And we're bringing emerging, established, and iconic voices who would not otherwise be in Baltimore and otherwise engage with our community, or who are just not visible. So that's part of this era of, meeting and achieving the mission for me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And that definitely aligns with my values in doing this podcast, that aligns in being on brand right there in Station North. It's one of those points where you're near various like intersection points where people from out of town can come in. You have a train station right there. You have 83. You have all of these different access points, and then it's right there, almost concentrated. You have Impact Hub there, Motor House. You have schools within colleges within distance. Micah's over there, and you're able to kind of bring all of these different ideas. And I think what you described there with some of the efforts that the Parkway is doing, it's representative of all of these different ideas, different voices. And it's like, let's put it out there visually. Let's do this in this way. And I had a conversation recently, and I'm thinking of putting together a piece about just different places that I frequent. And like, how do I class those based on certain criteria? So like, let's say if it's a coffee shop, are they their own roaster? How do I class that versus another place that's their own roaster? When I look at the Parkway, it to me is much more than a movie theater, much more than a movie house. And it's an event location for me. When I go there, it's for an opening. It's for a screening. I think the last time I was there, it was like maybe almost a year ago, what have you, because I've just been super busy. But I went there for something really, really big and really cool. I went there for that talk with, it was Candyman. And I was just like, I was coming back from, I was coming back from Rhode Island.
Travis Case and Ryan Bowen and B. Charisse.
Yeah.
And Travis did that fantastic, let me give you a little history of Candyman.
Yeah.
You know, that little film was for that night.
Yeah.
And it was so great. We played it in front of the film the entire 3 weeks we had the film.
It's
and that
great.
was one of our opening events. And it's a good example of when we kind of eventize and add. There's nothing like, it's great to see the film on the big screen. That's crucial, that communal experience. But when we can connect you up to creatives who are even, whether they're involved with the film or not, and you start to hear their ideas and perspectives. And the audience was really, it was hopping.
Yeah.
The energy was really palpable in the audience. I'm glad you were here. That was a great night.
Yeah.
And all of us, I think we're all capable of seeing our missions as more than this primary responsibility to arts, culture, film. That's a responsibility, but it's a real responsibility to the community and contributing directly to positive change in a city like Baltimore. Really connecting with and contributing to the vibrancy and vitality. We can't do everything, but one kind of anchor. And we have to see ourselves in the mix with everything else going on in Station North and the whole city. It's an ecosystem. So I care about the ecosystem, not just what's in the confines of the Parkway.
Absolutely. So I want to step back a little bit. So tell me about where you grew up and maybe one of those early experiences, like recognizing it's a more refined version of what was the first time you realized movies were cool, but what was that earliest experience in recognizing that films were a form of art?
Oh, wow. Recognizing it as a form of art definitely came later. I think that was teens for me, but I was experiencing movies at a pretty young age. I had older cousins in town. I grew up in a very small town of 14,000 people in northeastern Ohio, about 1.5 miles from Lake Erie.
Oh, wow.
A conservative community. My parents are from the Caribbean. They came to New York, and my mother had a sister who came directly from Jamaica to this little town, Painesville, Ohio. And my parents visited and said, people have houses with gardens and yards, not just apartments. They moved there. 8 West Indian families moved there in this little tiny town. We had one movie theater downtown called the Lake Theater. Eventually, there were multiplexes built when I was in high school and going out to college. So I was aware of film at a very young age because I had older cousins who would take. I had a cousin my same age, and I have 3 sisters and a brother. But my second and third sister, we saw Beatles films. We saw a lot of the Disney films, the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang stuff, whatever was coming in. And I saw movies in big movie palaces in Kingston, Jamaica, probably about the age of, I think I was probably 10 or 11 or 12. And again, it was sort of Disney stuff, family films. And we watched them on television, but I've always been fascinated by stories. I always want to be transported. And sometimes I want to be live and real because my favorite stories, quite frankly, are the real ones, the documentaries. That's my absolute favorite. And I don't think I saw a documentary probably till I was in college, maybe something in high school. But I was experiencing movies from a really young age.
Yeah, I go back to one of my, and maybe this has something to do with kind of what I was describing to you before we got started. One of the earliest movies I remember was my parents gave me dinner, and I was probably 3 or 4. And whatever Friday the 13th movie was going on, it's like, yeah, you go here, sit here, watch this by yourself. We're having fun. We're doing, adult stuff. And it's like, this might not have been the best. However, for like 5 straight Halloweens, I won as Jason Voorhees. I think it had an impact on me. That was my art. That was my Chitty Chitty Bang Bang now.
Well, I got to tell you, Rob, it's funny because I told you I have 2 sons and I have a stepson, and my youngest son, he's an arborist actually at American U. I'll never forget when he was 4. We were in California and we were going somewhere, and he goes, Mom, I got to wait for all the blood and guts part. And it was Terminator. It was a Terminator film. I thought, I am ruining this kid. He's 4. He loves blood and guts. It was the same thing. We were pretty open with what they watched. When it came to music, if it had if it was hip hop and rap music with a violent label.
Yeah.
I said, I'm only buying it if you listen to it with me. So that tempered his choices on that when he was 10, 11, and 12. But, you know, everybody has so much early exposure right now. There's access to everything, and very young kids are on their phones and experiencing stories and films at a very young age, and pretty potent, complex stories that I'm not even sure they altogether understand. So I think I grew up, you know, my parents were a little more conservative, so I don't want to say we were sheltered, but what we viewed was curated by them.
Yeah.
What we went to, they really did. They really did. I don't want to say protect us, but they were really careful about what we watched at what age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My parents had that kind of same vibe, and ultimately, I think what I'm kind of echoing in is this notion that, you know, some of the movie tastes early on, and maybe how that shifts. It definitely comes from, it's a familial thing. It's like, oh, well, my cousins put me on to this, and I remember it was music and movies, and that came from the cousins, and some of the things that we maybe should not have watched, which it was really interesting because it wasn't really the violence part, right? Like, my dad, Marines, he's like, oh yeah, Jean-Claude Van Damme, watch all of them. That's what we're doing. This is Friday.
Yeah.
But when it came to like movies that had like a really strong like black cast, like a large black cast, if it was too vulgar, they wouldn't let us watch it. So I remember specifically we could not watch Harlem Nights. It was like, no, you got to be older to watch this.
Yeah, to watch this. No, those are the kinds of decisions my parents were making too about films and content. And I think they also wanted to be cautious about just the content and how we talked about it and how it was portrayed.
I have this other question. When we're looking for finding our calling, right? And I learned that calling is, it's vocation. It's deeper than, oh, I want to do this as a career for a period. It has to be a through line, I think, in some of the activities. They may be various things, like somebody's calling might be to be able to create, and they may have a job in various areas, but it's not just, oh, I want to be a musician this time. It's like, no, I want to paint. I want to create this. I want to create that. That might be their calling, to be a creator. Tell me about a time where you were encouraged to like explore, because I think it's not always a direct line when you're finding that calling. So tell me about a time where, you know, you were encouraged to explore, which maybe kind of led to the work that you're doing now.
You know, we there were 5 of us, and we were a close-knit family. We had all these other West Indians. So we did showcase nights. We all played music. We danced. So there was a lot of activity all the time and a lot of play. And we all took music lessons at a very young age, but we were encouraged to explore everything. I mean, I'm a drum majorette. I twirl fire. I've had experiences, couple of my sisters did cheerleading. We played sports. I've played tennis. And my parents put us in everything that they could possibly put us in. They were big on education, big on get your education first. We don't care what you do, but get the education. Be knowledgeable about it. And I always tell my sons, I don't care what you do, but if it's driving a truck, I want you to own the company.
Absolutely.
So that encouragement and exploration, and we went to public schools, and it was a small district, but they had a music program, they had an art program. So I took art. I wasn't very good at it, but I loved it. And so we really had a lot of creative experiences and excursions. You know, we went places, we traveled, we saw other places. So your mind is opened up, your world is opened up. Whether you're taking a physics class or a chemistry class, you're exploring, and you're on a track of exploration. So I felt very fortunate to have grown up in that environment with parents and brothers and sisters, where it was not only a lot of fun, but it was pretty rich in terms of its breadth and what we engaged in. I had always loved teaching, and so I wanted to be a teacher, and I loved music. So my first instinct was music teaching. And I got my first degree in that and started out that way, and then found that I didn't like all the administration and the, music teachers at that time. And Ohio was like 49th of the 50 states in how it funded music and the way that it was supporting teachers. And I just felt like, I was a monitor and an administrator. My great love in the teaching was middle schoolers and composing with them. And so I was always trying to do these kinds of creative activities and not following the rule books. But that is also me. I'm always going to challenge, what's in place and want to turn it over and look at it from the outside.
As you should.
Yeah. That's just the way I operate and the way I'm wired. But I think what I found in college, where I was in a school of music, was I loved the performance, I loved the learning, but it made me really nervous. I didn't get the juice from performing. I could perform, but I didn't get this, I'm on fire, I gotta be on the stage. I found that for me, it was putting it all together. And my commitment really became, out of all the experiences I had, how do I leverage my experiences to help other artists?
Yeah.
So for me, my quest has been for a very long time, Rob, how can an artist in the United States have an idea, get that idea made, and own the final disposition of it? What's that co-location of resources look like in the U.S.? Because we don't have that system. It's pieced together. It's very hard to get your work made. It's very hard to carry out your idea and expression and then own it and control what happens to it. In film, it's crazy. In the visual arts, it's crazy. In the performing arts, there are more unions, there's more apparatus, it's more associative. Yeah. So it's a little bit better, but we're a commodity in the United States. And I think it's ecosystem.
And I think that's what I'm seeing as, I guess, my medium is being blown out. You have varying views on what it is and what it isn't. And, some people will say, oh, it's an art, so we can fund it. And other places will say, oh, no, it's a marketing tool, or it's not this, it's not that. But at the same time, you see companies buying up podcasts and buying up that whole let me get your catalog. Let me get this from you. And one of the things I was mentioning to you before that, and it was another thing that stuck out that you were saying, I felt it. I felt it. It was just kind of the paraphrase is this notion, not really feeling like that being on fire, being on a stage, wanting to help people realize their creative, pursuits. Yeah. And that is something that I've really gotten into. I realized, when I was younger, have been on a stage and I'm talking about early as 5, being an MC for some graduation thing. And I was like, I just don't know any better, And now I like doing it. I need to do it more to know whether I'm comfortable or uncomfortable with it. However, the stuff that I like the strategy behind things. I this would be cool. I can curate this. And I've moved more into this kind of cultural curator spot versus being purely a podcast. I do much more than that. And especially the way that they've been deprecated, because podcasts are very DIY, and you can figure out, you can do your own thing, and it's personality driven, and it's information in there and things of that nature, but really it's personalities. If I just didn't have a personality and asked you some monotone questions, we wouldn't be having the type of conversation we had prior to this and during this interview.
That's true.
It's something that's in there. And so it's much more than just this banal vanilla pod.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, the one thing I want to tag on is I just know I'm a natural producer. And what producers do well, creative producers, executive producers, I bring the money, I bring the resources, and I know how to put it together. And I love putting it together and making it happen. It just gives me the greatest joy. And it floats my boat. Crazy as it seems. So I love the messy vitality of that. That's what really drives me. Yeah. Yes, I can talk on a stage. I'm happy to. I get too nervous at the performance, but I'm very conversant. I'm fine to introduce things. But for me, it's that getting in there and putting something together and making it happen. And that end result and that process, I love it. I love it.
I wrapped up one of the movie screenings that I did, the most recent one, and sometimes I just go off on not a tangent per se, but go off and I reference something that's super weird just to see who's in my tribe that's there. And I was like, yeah, good night and God bless. And it's like, did you just quote Russell Simmons? I was like, maybe. Y'all have a good night now. Drive safely. It's like, you're stupid. So let's talk about the festival a little bit in terms of let's start off with how does the submission process work? Like, how many do you get, and what are maybe 2 to 3 like qualities that you really look for in a submission? Because I would imagine it's a lot that come in. I would imagine that review process is pretty wild. So enlighten me a little bit there.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, I'm intentionally not involved with selecting the films, so I see a few of them.
Sure.
Our artistic director really drives that, and our programming team. But we get anywhere from 900 to 1,000 submissions.
Wow.
And it wasn't always that way. During the pandemic, it was down the last 2 years by 200-300, but we went right back up. We had 900 submissions for this year, and we were concerned because the industry is disrupted. The pipeline of films is disrupted, and filmmakers are trying to make their way in a very, very challenging time. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of submissions. The filmmakers do pay a small fee. They pay less if they're from Baltimore. We've privileged Baltimore and opened up slots for Baltimore and given more waivers there. But they submit through Film Freeway. They have to submit a completed film. We have a 45-member screening committee. And even that we've really rejiggered and expanded this year to really represent Baltimore in a different way and to represent filmmaking in a different way. And it's not all filmmakers. There are community members on here. They all view batches of films, batches of 50, 60 films. And most of the films submitted in that 900 are short films, but there's a lot of feature films too. So this year in the festival, we are playing 130 shorts, organized in 16 programs. That's one of the largest contingents of shorts we've ever had. And then we have 21 features. And not many of the features came out of submissions. We lost a few. We took half of the features were to come out of submissions this year, and we lost them to other festivals. And filmmakers are making their decisions differently. They're waiting for Cannes. So this is part of the disruption in the industry that we're just navigating right now. But that 1,000, every one of those films is seen by at least 3 people.
Wow. Yeah.
So that there's a real consideration of the film. Is this a first-time filmmaker in their debut film? That's different from Matt Porterfield from Baltimore or Stanley Nelson, who's an Oscar-nominated Black documentary filmmaker who calls us up and says, "Can I have my film at your festival?" So it runs the gamut. So when you're considering what you're looking for is, where is this filmmaker in their career?
Yeah.
And if it's really nascent, because festivals, you don't have enough time and often room to bring everybody around. It's a different kind of excursion and experience than the prep we can do for an audience for a film we're going to have for 2 or 3 weeks.
Sure.
So, if the film is a debut film, first-time filmmaker, and it's not quite there yet, can we introduce it to an audience and provide that context?
Yeah.
Is that going to work in the festival? And then there's a mix you're looking for. We don't want 100 documentaries. We have people who like all kinds of things. I mean, my artistic director said to me, "I'm looking for more comedies. I can't find any comedies. So many of the films are dark." And I said, well, this may be where people are at. So it's that mix and blend of narratives and types of stories. We're absolutely leading into Black, Indigenous, Brown, Latinx, people of color, queer, trans. We want to have that breadth of creatives involved in who are making films today. Women, women are greatly underserved in the industry, as are people of color, as are Indigenous people. And so we really look for those films. They still have to be completed films and good films. And the screening committee ranks them. And we had an artistic director this year and 3 guest programmers who did the shorts films and helped with narrative features. So there's a lot of eyeballs on this beyond the screening committee, really sorting through and having conversations. So the other thing we did this year were a number of meetups, virtual and in person with the screening committee. Never done this before. People sort of did their batches of film, sent in their reviews. These were conversations where we showed some of the films and people talked about their favorites, really looking for common language and where the differences were and talking about that. So real conversations about the content, about the film, what the filmmaker was trying to do. So I think it was a very considered process this year. And, you know, we have a reputation for focusing on emerging filmmakers. The filmmakers who are earlier in their career, we're staying with that because they don't get these kinds of opportunities. Our audiences love it. We are noted for short films. And short films are people too, as my artistic director always likes to say. They don't often get distributed. So we're a real home for short films at this festival and year round. That's why we have so many this year and we're bringing so many of those filmmakers in. So we were thrilled to get 900 submissions this year. And then we get folks who do call us up.
Yeah.
I've just finished. We have veterans who've been with the festival year after year. Can I send you a trailer? Could you take a look at this? Would you consider it? That happens too. Yeah. And we're sourcing from other festivals. So we do have a couple of films from Venice, from Cannes last fall, from New York International Film Festival, Sundance, South by Southwest. It's not a lot. We try to go with the submissions that we get and mix it up a bit because all those festivals are hybrid and have virtual screenings. So you can see some of them there.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's a real labor of commitment and love.
Yeah. As I'm hearing it, I was like, I'm interested. How many again? Like, but also, yes.
Yeah, and I think your minimum is at least one batch. I don't have that right. And so we'll put a call. This was the other thing. We got to that 45. We did an open call for the first time ever this year.
Nice. Yeah.
For screening committee members. Again, this is all about inclusion. And we don't know everybody. Right. We're a small organization. We have a certain kind of reputation for not being very inclusive, I think. Yeah. And the industry itself is closed. So this is all in an attempt to open this up, invite more people to participate. And they all did extraordinary work.
That's great.
You know, we have another program like that I quickly tell you about, Rob. It's the Maryland Filmmakers Fellowship Program. Jed Dietz, our founder, started this with Sundance Institute in 1996. A lot of people don't know about it. Sundance has not only their festival, they have all these labs. So they have an Indigenous lab, they've got an art of nonfiction lab, and they have feature film labs for screenwriting, directing, producing. So we have had an engagement with them since 1996, where they send out of the script writing and directors lab 5 or 6 scripts, and community members read them, not film people. Yeah. Decide on a script, and we give a $10,000 fellowship. It's actually now more. So that was going on through 2020, and I raised some funds to quadruple that. It's a $40,000 fellowship now.
It's amazing.
It's $15,000 up front for pre-production and get your film going, rewrite the script, and then it's $25,000 on the back end if you finish your film. Giving you money nobody has when they've asked their brother, their mother, their cousin, their company to get the film made. Nobody has any money to get it to market, so there's a $25,000 marketing fund. Yeah. So we made the first of those awards last year and this year.
That is it's amazing.
And it's a little known program. It is connected to Sundance, but it's just community members. And I think we have to value the knowledge and the experience of our community. And so we say y'all come.
Yeah.
We have some filmmakers on the screening committee and some people who know film, and they add to the conversation. So for those who don't, everybody's learning. And everybody's perspectives are invaluable.
So that's going to be a podcast to putting a movie together soon. Just a stretch over here. And
we got plenty of people who can do that podcast. I got some on my board. Alyssa Blunt-Moorhead, Ramona Diaz, who did 1,000 Cuts, this amazing documentary 2 years ago about Maria Ressa, who is a Nobel Prize-winning journalist who runs Rappler in the Philippines and she was convicted by President Duterte and his regime for, breaking their rules, which don't allow a whole lot of freedom of the press. Right. And so she was the subject of that film. So Ramona's been around a long time. We got a lot of makers. Nia Hampton, who runs Black Femme Supremacy Festival. We're involved with a lot of people who are making their films and who could fill a podcast or two about how to get it made, especially today because it's challenging.
Okay, I think a further discussion would work.
Yeah.
So
and how to get it seen? That's another one.
Absolutely,
that's a problem.
So I guess a good stopping point would be I want to really we're going to plug later so we can really get that in. So I guess we should hit those rapid fire questions. How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I hope you'll plug the festival because the films are amazing this year.
That's going to be we're saving that for the end. That's going to be the last what is it digestif or what have you.
Rapid fire. Let's go rapid fire.
So I got 4 of them. What's the favorite country you visited? You mentioned travel earlier.
Yeah, and I did a lot of traveling. I ran a performing arts industry association, and I took it global on 6 continents. So I have 2. Wow, it's hard, but I think 2 immediately pop in. Brazil. I was there for a World Culture Forum meeting that the Ford Foundation set up. That is an extraordinary place of extremes. And so I was in Salvador de Bahia and near Recife, which is a software hub. And that is just an amazing, colorful, wildly diverse and exciting place. I could live there. I just love it. The people are beautiful. It's beautiful. And the other unbelievable experience I had before I came here was 6 years working on a U.S.-China project. And I went to China for the first time before I did the project in 2011. And I had an engagement with some cultural ministries throughout China in this industry association that I ran. But this project took me into the country, and I ran a design team. We were building a 12-acre classical Chinese garden in the U.S. National Arboretum in D.C. The land was donated by Congress. It's a binational project. Mm-hmm. And I ran the first foundation and got it up and running. And the construction design done. It's at 100% construction design before the Trump administration came in and put it on ice. So I have visited 4 or 5 cities in China for extended stays, and that was also extraordinary. It is I don't know that I'd say I could live there, but I love going there and getting to know the people on the ground. And I wasn't working with everything is government there, but I wasn't working with the top people in the Chinese government. Certainly, everything is connected to the government, but I have some long-term enduring friends out of that experience. And then my other favorite, of course, is southern Spain. I'm in love with Spain. Barcelona, the south of Spain. I could absolutely live there.
That's great.
I love my people in the West Indies too. My mom's from Cuba, my dad's from Jamaica, so I'm fond of those places. But when I've traveled, they're just places that have just, you know how you go to a place and you feel so at home, and it just you not only the warmth, but you feel like you just feel like you belong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and each of those places seem of interest. I've had a few Brazilian artists that have been on, and it's like, it's
Brazil's
just like
amazing.
It's
amazing.
all of the black people here. That was literally what I was told.
Exactly. Exactly.
Really?
And Colombia nearby also. I worked with the first Afro-Colombian ministress of culture, Paula Morena Zapata, in the early 2000s, and I forgot about that. That was another amazing experience in Medellin, mm-hmm. in Cartagena, Bogota.
Yeah.
And my daughter-in-law is from outside of Bogota. I have this natural, just total affinity with Latin America.
I dig it.
I don't know if it's part of my heritage or what, but I just do with the people. I'm simpatico with the people. You send me anywhere there, I'm comfortable. I don't speak Portuguese, so I was in trouble in Brazil. I knew one phrase. The phrase was, I do not speak Portuguese. Não falo português. But if you speak it perfectly, people start speaking to you in Portuguese.
I know Bom Dia. That's about it. It's like,
I know Bom Dia.
Let's see. What is one word that you believe to be the most powerful word in the English language?
That's an interesting one.
I've gotten some interesting answers on this one. Yeah.
That's an interesting one. Well, it is one of my favorite words, and it's a dual word, so I'm going to cheat a little bit.
Spin it.
It is power sharing. And I talk a lot about that here because I think we have to be about that. I think there's no equity and there's no inclusion if you're not sharing power. So an organization like this that is privileged, even though we're small, that has resources, that has knowledge and expertise, it has to be shared. There's no equitable situation if we're not putting it on the table. And so it's become a very, I've inculcated this. It's a way of we have to be here and we have to be about. So I think it's been on my mind a lot. And a lot of our work centers on that kind of responsiveness.
Yeah, that's important. That's important.
And probably a second one I'd say is transparency. I'm open and transparent, and there has to be transparency. So,
yeah, those are two good ones. Well, 2.5. You were cheating a little bit there.
I know, I'm cheating.
So
power sharing has a dash.
Yeah, we'll do punctuation in this round. So here's the last two. Favorite movie with a Baltimore connection. This is the one I was describing earlier that I thought you'd like. Because it brings it down. It's like, all right, was it filmed in Baltimore? Does it feature like a Thomas Jane, like a Baltimore person from Baltimore? And I do that film series shot in Baltimore, so I was kind of thinking in that vein. Is it something that was like done here? It's like, oh yeah, Liberty Heights. I really like that, or like a Barry Levinson movie. Like, what comes to mind for you?
Well, Bernie Levinson's Diner is a classic, so that definitely comes to mind. I wouldn't say it's on my list of, because I got tons of favorites. But, and this is a new film that I just think it didn't get enough attention by Angel Christie Williams. It's about a Black artist, visual artist, making his way in D.C. But she's from West Baltimore. It was shot in Baltimore. It's using Baltimore visual artists. It's called Really Love. It's on Netflix. It's a beautiful contemporary love story. But it's also, we had a discussion here with Bradford Young and Angel and some of the actresses. It was another night like Candyman. And the conversation really was about the portrayal of, an almost exclusively all Black cast. There were other folks in, certainly. And the portrayals of Black people on camera, the careful choices made about color, how skin color is represented, background colors, just the patterns and designs in a room. Somebody commented in the audience, this is one of the few times I've seen the lead character's entire family. You always hear about the family, but you don't see them.
Yeah.
When it comes to Black films. So that's another one of my favorites. I love all of these, As Told to God Thyself, which was done in 2018 or 19 as a short, done with Kamasi Washington, who I absolutely am insane over. Amazing saxophonist out of Los Angeles. It was shot here by Baltimore filmmakers, the Uma Chroma Collective. It used the Baltimore School of the Arts. And it is a beautiful short dreamscape. A little more experimental, and I kind of tend toward the experimental side. I love the quirk, the experimental, the hybrid.
That's great. That's great. So lastly, when you think of Baltimore and describing Baltimore, what are 3 words that come to mind?
I'm going to have to cheat.
No hyphenations
3
here.
words. Okay, no hyphenation. I guess 3 words. Vibrant, cinematic, ground. This is the ground for cinema. That's how I think of Baltimore. During our festival, it's 5 days that we're the cinematic ground, but Baltimore is every day this vibrant cinematic ground.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. That is vibrant cinematic ground. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to thank you for coming onto the podcast and
Thank you.
want to encourage you to really highlight, plug anything that we haven't hit. Give us those dates. Tell us about the film festival. The floor is yours. I'm done. I'm turning my mic off.
This is a mic drop moment. Well, so the festival, April 27, next Wednesday through May 1st. You can't miss it. It's 130 short films organized in 16 programs, 21 features from all over the globe. There's a special Baltimore block of short films. There are Baltimore filmmakers involved throughout. So Balti Shorts, it's our 4th edition of this film, made by, for, about Baltimore. Our opening night shorts is fantastic. One of the shorts, Buck 'em Right Back, by DDM. DDM will be performing before we show the 7 short films that are part of that program. John Waters is back with his John Waters Presents, which he's done for 24 years. He's going to be presenting Maps to the Stars, David Cronenberg's film, which barely had a theatrical release. A multi-alumni filmmaker and attendee of the festival, Stanley Nelson, is bringing 2 brand new documentaries that'll air on public television this fall, Becoming Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, Visions of Freedom. So they'll be on PBS later this year. He's coming with Nicole London, his co-director, and we're premiering the opening episode of We Own This City, the new David Simon HBO series based on the book by Justin Fenton and about the Baltimore Police Department Gun Trace Task Force. Yeah. So that's a community conversation. We're going to have 9, I call them resource people, but it's David Simon, his executive producer, Dee Watkins, who was in the writer's room on many of these episodes, Justin Fenton, the writer of the book, community leaders, and a couple of past members for a community conversation to talk about, because it's a tough subject. It's a subject that ticks people off, gets them excited and energized, so we're looking for a really robust conversation. And then there are just so many beautiful films. I mean, Marvelous in the Black Hole, a family film with a young Asian woman just trying to find her way in a difficult, challenging family situation, and she befriends a magician played by Rhea Perlman. Beautiful film called Karmalink that's out of Cambodia. Jake Wachtel directed it. He was teaching filmmaking to young kids there in Phnom Penh for a number of years, and they're part of the film, and it's a sort of sci-fi spiritual film. John Cesare Goff bringing his beautiful film After Sherman, about his inheritance and family and the Gullah Geechee culture. He's part of that culture, and he's going to be inheriting land there. And so it's a hybrid documentary. It's more something that might be right up your street. And Fire of Love, this amazing film about a French couple who are volcanologists and their journey in the 60s and 80s. And they were some of the founding photography, footage, and science that informs volcanology today.
Wow.
And they really lived their lives for these volcanoes, and it chronicles their time together. It is so beautifully shot. I mean, you get this close to erupting volcanoes, and they step into it. It's just unbelievable, the daredeviling. Beautiful film from Iran called Hit the Road, about a family's road trip. And it's by the son of a very famous Iranian filmmaker, Panahi. Mm-hmm. So we really mix it up. It's just everything. A virtual reality. So there's a film called We Met Virtual Reality that was shot entirely in VR chat verite.
Wow.
And a lot of artists were experimenting with VR in the pandemic. So this whole thing follows the activities of a group of people and their relationships, all VR chat.
That's amazing. Hey, I just like when the boundaries are extended, and that's the thing. It's like, take risks in how you do things. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And lastly, where can you check things out? What's the website and social media and all that good stuff?
Yep, www.mdfilmfest.com. Social media, MdFF Parkway. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. I'm happy to drop a social media kit to you too, if you're interested.
Please.
Our marketing director just put that together. So you'll find us there, but definitely the website, mdfilmfest.com, is the easiest, fastest. You can see everything. There's a schedule view. There's a by film A to Z view. And on our homepage, everything is right there, all the programs.
Thank you so much for
Well,
coming.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. This has been a real treat for the day, and I'll wrap up there, I guess. So for Sandra L. Gibson of the Maryland Film Festival, SNF Parkway, I am Rob Lee, saying that there is art, film, boundaries, inclusion in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.